Good afternoon. We'll call to order the June 2017 meeting of the New Ulm Public Utilities Commission. The first item on the agenda is to review the minutes from our last meeting.
I'd offer that motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the Public Utility Commission held May 23, 2017.
I'll second.
Any discussion? We have a motion and second to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the Public Utilities Commission held May 23, 2017. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is to receive our reports from boards and commissions, with the Utilities Director going first.
Thank you, President Heine and Commission members. A few items to note from this month's report. I would start with the transformer project, Southside Substation. Last month I mentioned to you that the transformer had been unloaded onto its pad. I'll update you now that the wiring and connections are complete. Final testing is occurring this week on the breaker equipment and the transformer itself, and it's anticipated that the transformer project will go online shortly after the 4th of July. So it'll help to provide extra capacity down in that south side of town in time for our summer peaks. Another item I'd like to note is that the gas department recently completed the construction of a approximately 2,500-foot high-pressure gas line along North Highland. It'll tie together the 80-pound systems that run up 5th North and Center Street, and thus be able to provide redundant supply to notable locations such as the hospital and the Martin Luther College. So another notable project that's now currently in operation. And lastly, it's not in your report, but I'll let you know that on June 13th, we had a pretty significant electrical peak. We peaked out at 41,522 kilowatts of demand, and that's our highest June peak since 2012. So weather plays into that a lot, but it's good to see that we may have a inflection point on our electrical demand here. So that's good news. That's it for my highlights.
I'd offer a motion to receive and order filed the report regarding utility operations during the month of June 2017.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? On the motion and second to receive and order filed the report regarding utility operations during the month of June 2017, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And that motion carries. Next, we have a presentation by Mr. Marietta of FVB Energy.
Yeah, I'll just say a few words here, President Heine, Commission members. Our steam system has been in operation for decades, and it operates very well, but we've never done a distribution model for that system to determine the capability of delivering a sufficient amount of steam energy to all the extents of that system. So Mr. Marietta is here to provide us an update on his analysis of our distribution system.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners. It was an enjoyable assignment for us. FEB Energy, just 2 words of introduction. We're a specialty consulting firm that only deals with district energy, district heating, and district cooling. And we obviously, this kind of project is right in our kind of sweet spots, the kind of things we do. Today I'm going to talk about the hydraulic analysis that we did, and that's probably was the significant part of this study. And then the New Ulm people asked us also to look at some other issues related to the steam system, which we did, and we'll talk about that. In the hydraulic analysis, I'll just briefly introduce the software that we used. It's called Termis, and I'll talk about briefly again about the data and assumptions and where they came from. And then we'll talk more about the low pressure steam model and what we learned from that modeling, and also the high pressure steam model. The Termis, it's a software that's been developed for modeling all kinds of district energy systems, cooling, so chilled water, hot water, and steam. And we use it quite often in our company. It's a hydraulic modeling tool, and you can basically, if you get the assumptions and of what you're modeling into it, you can impose different things on it and see what the results of those would be. So you can use it to manage your network to see how future loads would impact it and what it looks like today. And basically, we've created this as a tool for the New Ulm District Energy System, and it's available. You could purchase the software. It's relatively expensive, in my opinion. You know, they don't sell software anymore. They just sign you up to annual renewals, and it's close to $5,000 a year. So we're happy to make runs for you when and if you would like to look at any kind of thing in the future, but you certainly could own it yourself as well. So some of the significant data, and I want to thank Dan and George and the people I worked with at New Ulm, because they were very helpful in getting the proper data, and this is the most important part, to get that data into the model so that it produces the right results. So we got the production plant data, and this is peak production plant data, because obviously we're worried about what's happening at the peak, not at most of the other time. And we got all the customer steam usage data, which we inputted into the model as well. And of course, the distribution maps themselves, the pipe, how they run, what sizes they are, and so forth and so on. And then, of course, there are other assumptions that we make about the distribution pipes, of what the capability of the insulation is, you know, and because over the years you've got different types of piping, different types of insulation. So we have to make general assumptions about fitting losses and other model assumptions. And what we try to do is, once we get the model running, we actually got from the District Energy Group readings at various places in the system, on the low pressure system, and then we use that to tune the model to make sure that it's producing results that make sense. So this is maybe a little hard to read, but this is the low pressure system node map. So we create nodes at various places where there's a piping size change, where there's a corner, where there's various things that and there's approximately 80 or 70 some nodes. See that? The biggest one, I think, is that one in the very bottom. The furthest one that we looked at is node 68, and that's the furthest from the plant hydraulically. But anyway, these nodes are assigned, and then between each node, of course, we have the pipe sizing and the loads that come off and on and so forth. So this is an example of what the model produces. This is the low pressure system pressure profile. And here we're showing the nodes, the pressure at each node from the plant all the way out to the furthest point hydraulically, which I mentioned is node 68. And I think the important thing to see right away is that the system is performing quite well, in the sense that if there were bottlenecks or problems delivering the proper amount of steam at peak, you would see this pressure profile dropping quite low. But still here, even at the peak, and we estimated the peak somewhat conservatively, so even here we're still around 7 pounds. So that tells you right away that the system, the low pressure system, has capacity to add additional load. Now, of course, where that load is and how much that load is will make a difference. But now that you have this model, you can actually, you know, when you had a customer, any customer that you thought was going to come on and where they were located, you could easily determine whether you could deliver the proper pressure and temperature to them.
Carl,
Yeah.
if I may, for the frame of
Sure.
reference for the commissioners here, node 68, I believe, is Turner Hall.
Yeah, sorry.
State Street.
I
So
don't
that's
actually, yeah, it's
the
good that you
furthest
point that
extent.
out, because, and that's what we just looked at, that one, because it's the furthest hydraulically from the plant. So we're even under peak conditions, we're delivering over 7 pounds of pressure from 10, and so that's very acceptable. I think the report states that the system still, individual systems in the buildings would still work fine even if the pressure dropped down as low as 3 pounds. So there's plenty of room there to add additional load. So the low-pressure system conclusions were that the low-pressure system has capacity to add additional load, and now that you have this modeling tool, you can always check in the future to make sure that any particular place where the load would be added, that doesn't adversely affect anybody in the system. And of course, if it did, you'd have to maybe make some adjustments, but then you would know where those adjustments need to be made by using this modeling tool. So then we looked at the high-pressure system. The high-pressure system obviously is a much simpler system. It just goes out of the plant two ways, one to AMPI across the street, and then the other one down to Firmenich. And I know this was one of the more important things that was looked as an output for this, because there's some discussion about expansions, and we wanted to see, what kind of capacity this high-pressure system had to deliver. There is a point that this is basically a 6-inch system, but if you look between node, I think it's B and F, there's a 4-inch section that was installed there to replace some old line that had gone bad. And I'll show you what the impact of that is when we look at the pressure profile. So when we look at the pressure profile, we see that section has a kind of a choke point on the steam pressure going out of the system. It's not affecting operations today in any way. I mean, you're still delivering the proper pressure and temperatures to the various industrial customers that you have. However, it could impact something in the future depending on, let us say, if Firmenich wanted to get bigger, this could become an issue. So we ran some basic numbers just to see. The high-pressure line can easily deliver over 14,000 pounds per hour to Firmenich, and normally they run around 9 or 10, I believe, or something like that. So that's clearly, today, you don't have any trouble, and they could have some reasonable load growth and still not have any issues. The 4-inch segment is kind of a choke point. If you raise the 6-inch line, the 4-inch line, if we replace that section with a 6-inch line, then you could deliver almost 30,000 pounds an hour to Firmenich. But at this point, you can't really, in my opinion, decide whether that's desirable or not. What's really needed is to understand from Firmenich when they're ready, what kind of peak loads they would anticipate if they have some kind of an expansion, and what their minimum temperatures and pressures are. So then we can easily use the model to run that new projected load to see if that 4-inch line would need to be upsized to 6-inch, or whether it could be left at 4-inch and be adequate.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
And as my memory is not as good as it used to be, and in case there's people watching the television tonight, can you describe briefly high pressure versus low pressure?
Oh, sure. Okay, low pressure, in this case, it's a 10-pound, the pressure is 10 pounds going out. It's saturated steam, basically, meaning that it doesn't have any superheat in it. And that's what serves most of the customers on the New Ulm District Energy System. High pressure is, I think, nominally around 140 pounds. So it's some people would call that medium pressure. There are a lot of different, because pressures can go, big plants have 600 pound, 1,200 pounds. So, but here it's clearly higher than the low, so it's high.
Sure.
But it's 140 pounds, so it's roughly 14 times more pressure, and requires it has a higher temperature and a higher pressure profile, and it also, going out of the plant, has got superheat in it, meaning it's higher temperature than if it was just saturated steam. So it's a different product. It's a product that's typically used for industrial
So
customers.
the end user is kind of the driving between the high and the low.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, in the case of the low-pressure steam, the vast majority of the loads, the steam usage is just for heating,
Yeah.
and low pressure works just fine for that.
Okay.
But high pressure, then you have industrial needs, process needs, and things like that.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. We also were asked to look at a couple other issues related to, one is the steam metering, and basically New Ulm is using the same steam metering that people have been using for many years, and I'm not saying that that's bad, because many people use these, what I would call bucket type, or they refer to them as the original manufacturer Cadillac type meters. It's just basically a bucket that goes around like this, and it fills up with condensate and measures the steam that is used. There were a couple issues that New Ulm wanted to look at. One is that those kind of meters don't really allow remote reading. That was one. And also, they have a certain amount of additional maintenance because you have moving parts. Condensate is corrosive to some extent, so the meters, the buckets kind of corrode out from time to time, so they have to be replaced. So we looked at another type of metering, which is called a magnetic flow meter, and that meter doesn't have any moving parts. And it's actually cheaper than a new condensate meter, Cadillac type. What we think, we also saw that there is an adapter that can go on the existing Cadillac type meters that would send a signal to the ICOM system that you have that would allow remote metering, and that's a relatively cheap thing. It's only a couple $100 and easy to install. But it adds another moving part to the system, and then you have to have power, and which you don't have, and also you have to have your ICOM system. But you could go to that and get the remote reading that you would like to get. What we suggest is, that you try a trial with some of these magnetic flow meters. I would never suggest that you go out and talk about replacing your system. That would be very expensive. But as you have the opportunity, maybe put a couple trial installations in, put them in parallel with the condensate meter and test them over a year period of time. And if that looks like they're a good substitute, then over time you could replace them with this rather simple, a much more simpler type of metering system. We looked at condensate return system. I think you're doing everything right here. It's, as I mentioned, condensate is a corrosive thing, so it's hard to stop it from corroding from the inside out. To prevent external corrosion, it's best to put some kind of coating on it. We recommend an HDP cover. And I think you're doing more than that actually today, so I don't think that's an issue for you. Finally, just looked at load growth, and all the systems like this suffer from one similar problem, is that most people who are on steam systems don't really understand how steam gives up its energy to make heat and other things. And as a result, HVAC contractors don't understand it very well either, and I don't want to talk down about them, but they would rather do something that they clearly understand than something they don't. And so their tendency is not to look at steam, even though steam is available. And by the way, I think your steam is extremely attractive. It's priced extremely attractively. So it's within the area that the steam distribution system serves, it should be a primary consideration for any kind of new load. But oftentimes the customers don't understand it, the contractors don't understand it, and people in general don't understand exactly the benefits because you're co-generating here, and that has its own benefit, which I'm sure you've heard about before. So we're just suggesting, and we've done this kind of thing before, some kind of an educational program that could be run for employees, for contractors, and for customers. And this is just a simple outline of what could be in that kind of a education program. So finally, just summarizing, our main recommendations is, if you want to look at the low pressure system in more detail, see where the load growth might occur, or if you have a specific load, run the model, see if there's any issues. We would probably guess that there wouldn't be initially. The second one is, I don't think we can analyze the high pressure system any further without some input back from Firmenich about what their projected expansion might be, and even we would like to know what even if they don't want to talk about the expansion, it would be good to find out from them what their minimum pressure and temperature requirements are, because we don't know that today, and that's something we could make sure that the model would make sure that it's delivering that. We've already talked about, again, my recommendation on metering is give the magnetic flow meters a trial and see if they work for you. And then finally, the training program. That's something that's relatively inexpensive and has been popular in other places. So just something to consider. And that basically completes my presentation.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. One
Sure.
more. So even if Firmenich would not be coming back for additional steam flow, and we'd get a new industry of some sort that would need substantial flow, what kind of a time frame roughly would it take to satisfy a customer like that?
Well, if they were someplace where they could easily connect to the existing high-pressure system, you know, I mean, you could probably build that line in a couple months, you know. I think it's not, it depends on how far you have to go, and then if you're ordering special materials, like the kind of conduit steam system you use, sometimes that can be a long lead time, and so you'd have to look into that.
Okay.
But there's no, I mean, what I would say, if you saw or even a possibility of a new industrial customer, find out where they're going to be located, run the model, see what size line should be, and then you can
Get there
move on
pretty
from-
quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move to receive the presentation on New Ulm Steam Distribution System assessed by Carl Marietta, Vice President of FVB Energy, Inc.
I'll second.
Is there discussion on the motion? We have a motion and second to receive the presentation on New Ulm Steam Distribution System Assessment by Carl Marietta, Vice President of FVB Energy Incorporated. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Did we need any further discussion on where we're going with that information, or?
Well, I think we're going to use the report to help us examine future capital improvement projects. We are in discussions with Firmenich. It's been a bit of time, but they are considering an expansion to their plant. So we saw that one bottleneck, as Carl called it, in there. We'll have to discuss their needs for their ultimate load and make sure that we can provide a product that they can make use of, right, that doesn't hurt their operation. I think, though, I would like to take the opportunity to discuss that low-pressure steam a bit more. That's a nice resource in the downtown area. And with our incentive programs that we have, you know, I think we have about a 40% discount on new steam equipment in the form of reduced steam bills over a 5-year period. So if there's folks that may have converted off to a forced air system, you know, we'd like to get them back on the steam system, and we'll do everything we can for those customers with respect to our rebate programs. You know, we've invested in the plant here most recently with the improvement in the redundancy of the boilers and having a fully capable backup boiler system. So it's a really redundant system. Chances are you're not going to lose heat ever on that system. And, you know, aside from the boiler investments, we've got the back pressure steam turbines that were installed about 5 years ago. The low pressure back pressure steam turbine generates about 34 kilowatt hours of energy for every M-pound of steam that runs through it, and that's essentially free electricity. So it's a nice system. It's redundant, and I would just urge anyone with interest to contact us down at the Public Utilities, and we'll be
I
happy
just
to
wonder, I
provide.
liked his idea of an education program. I used to own a building downtown, and the misinformation about what it cost versus something else was just all over the map. And this was coming from contractors who should have known better. So I don't know if we should do that through the Chamber of Commerce or Mr. Toal, the economic developer, or somebody, but I do think the misinformation is still out there, and nobody knows what to believe. So I really do like that idea.
Well, we'll plan to follow up with Carl on
Okay.
that offering and make some
Okay.
educational opportunities available for our customers. Lastly, I'd just like to point out that with respect to the bank that's going on here, that's going to be going on steam. And, you know, we were pretty confident with our calculations that Dan and I had done, just pressure drop calculations from the plant, that everything was going to be fine. But Shannon, the bank's in good shape there, so you'll have plenty of heat.
Well, in the geographic area of potential customers would be basically the downtown area, and I think it goes up
Downtown
to,
area.
you said Turner Hall, and the Lind House is on Steam.
Yeah, right. The
So is there some
it
residential?
extends. There are a few residences along State Street that are on Steam. There's a residence along South Minnesota that's on the Steam system, but I'll say still the majority of the buildings along Minnesota are on the Steam system. That's the primary loop.
Is the old school right off Center Street?
That is on the Steam system. We've had discussions with the company that's coming in with the redevelopment plans about the availability of steam there, and to my knowledge, they would like to make use of that going forward with any plan that they have.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is to hear from Mr. Brown regarding computerized leak detection survey of the water distribution system.
Good evening. Just a real quick presentation here. If you look at the cover from our report, we've been doing these here locally about 10 years, which is kind of unusual for utilities. I've been in lots of utilities that have never done a leak detection. And so we've been doing them about 10 years. This report is nice in that he gives a sales pitch with how much the survey cost and what the savings is when we fix the leaks. And this report was from the 7th of this month, and we've already replaced half of the leaks already. He found one water main leak this time, and this is the second year in a row kind of like that. We think that the service line leaks that we're seeing here are residual, weakening of the services, because in 2014, that January through April, we had 72 services that froze in the ground, and that probably weakened some of these. About half of the service line leaks are on our side that we're responsible for them, and about half of them are responsibility of the customers. That's all I have. If you have any questions.
Just one question, George. From, so I agree, there's the nice little sales pitch there that it has an estimated payback of 4.7 weeks, which we would all love to see on every any kind of project. But from a fix-it cost, so you said we fixed most of the leaks.
Right.
Is it much of an investment for us to go out and fix these leaks?
It kind of depends. That each one's a separate thing. I would say that probably if on a service leak, we're in the boulevard if we're not in the street very much, and we can make a repair of a connection right at the curb stop, then you're talking about $1,000 probably.
Okay.
If it is an older service line, or for instance, say we found one that was lead, we would go all the way to the main and replace that. And then you of course got the corresponding cost of going, if the main is on the other side of the street from where this curb stop is, then that affects the cost. But and on the other hand, on the householder side, that's all their cost.
So I got two questions for you.
Mhm.
So on the homeowner side, we just send them a notice in the mail and say, hey, just so you know, you got a 5 or 10 gallon a minute leak in your front yard.
We have a form letter that says they have 7 days to repair it.
Okay.
How do you feel about that?
Well, actually, I'm okay with it. I just wondered what that process was.
Right.
You know.
And we're flexible with that. Some people can't just come up with a couple $1,000s. If they, for instance, had to replace from their house all the way out, depending on the length of their yard, depending whether they have to go under the basement floor, they can be quite expensive. So.
I would like to add one thing on that. Yeah, it is a big expense, and as a result of that expense, and some of our customers not being able to come up with that, if we say that average repair cost is $1,500 to $2,500, we developed a water service loan program through the utility, and I think that allows our customers to go up to $2,500 and have the water department oversee the repair, have the ability to either pay that off within a year's time, let's say by the time the assessments are calculated in the fall of the year, or else have it put on their property taxes and paid off over a 10-year period. Is that correct?
That's helpful.
Yeah, that's
So the other question I have is, how does the computer actually detect the leak? I mean, what is?
Well, I think the computer, we had the discussion this morning. I think the computerized part is the reports. What they do is they come into town, and to start with, one guy rides around on a scooter and at night and listens on every fire hydrant. He has a specific piece of equipment, and he listens and we do get calls from the police, because somebody, what are these people doing out here in the middle of the night? But that he can hear the sound of the water vibrating the pipe on a leak. And so after he does that, he comes back the next few days with a special piece of equipment called a chorator that will, he can hook onto a fire hydrant closest to where he thinks the leak is, and maybe onto a house, and that will tell him how many feet it is from that fire hydrant. And then, of course, he can get an estimate of how fast the water's flowing out of the pipe.
Okay.
And there, we were having a discussion, that works really well on metal pipes, not so well on plastic pipes. Last year, we hired somebody to come in, they said they could find a leak on plastic pipe, they couldn't. But there is newer technology out there all the time coming, and and I say this because when we repair our service lines ourselves, we're putting in plastic. We're putting in new water mains, we're putting in plastic,
Right.
so we want them to get that technology to find that kind of leak.
Great, thank you.
I'd offer a motion to receive and file the report regarding the June 2017 computerized leak detection survey of the water distribution system piping.
I'll second.
Is there any more discussion? We have a motion and second to receive and file the report regarding the June 2017 computerized leak detection survey of the water distribution system piping. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Let's see, we're into new business now. We need to consider receiving the comprehensive annual financial report for the New Ulm Public Utilities Commission.
So I'd offer the motion to receive the comprehensive annual financial report for the New Ulm Public Utilities Commission for the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2016.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? We have a motion and second to receive the comprehensive annual financial report for the New Ulm Public Utilities Commission for the fiscal year ended December 31, 2016. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And that motion carried. Next, we have a resolution to consider authorizing issuance of general obligation bonds.
So these bonds, the sale date is set for August 1st right now. There will be another item that will come before the commission or at the next meeting with the preliminary offering statement, so it'll have more details in it. What we're bonding for is $5 million for the wastewater treatment plant and the 20th Street lift station, and then another $440,000 for sewer improvements on 20th North. If I'm correct in saying 20th North, right? So, and then the rest of that $5.5 million would be issuance costs.
Nicole, do you know what the going interest rate right now is?
I do not know right now.
Is this more or less than we average every year, do you think?
PUC last bonded in 2009, 10. So it's, I mean, it would depend on the project as far as,
So it's not really like there's a level field at all every year?
no, there's not. Not like the city where we bond
Yeah.
every year for about $3 million.
Gotcha.
Is there a process that we go through when we look at our cash reserves to decide when or when not to bond? Like, is there a threshold for project size that says we'll bond this versus dip into the
Not there's,
cash reserves?
I don't know if there's a
that-
strict policy on that. I think, you know, we try to issue bonds for only more significant projects because the cost to set up the bonds is, it's significant. So I'll just give the example, one project that's out there right now where there's actually an internal loan is with our transformer project at the Southside Substation, where about $1 million of gas reserves, gas department reserves are being loaned to the electric department and paid back over a period of 10 years there. So that's $1 million project. You know, I think $1 million is probably a minimum level for going to bond here, right? So in this case, the sewer portion of this project, or of the bond sale, if we hadn't have had the opportunity to combine that with the ATAD improvements at the wastewater plant, that likely would have been a project that would have come out of the reserve funds, the $440,000 for the sewer improvement. So, you know, short answer, no, there's no policy, but I think that a general rule of thumb is about $1 million.
And the primary reason I ask is just, you know, as you look back at our investments, we're earning about 1.4, 1.5%, and if we end up bonding for 3.5, are we basically bonding just because we can, and is there availability? But I know that there's a balance of how much we have to sit with investment, and so just wondering if there's more of a formalized process.
City
around it.
interest rate last year when we bonded was right around 2%, so.
Okay. And at that point, it might be 6 of one, half dozen the other. But
Yeah, you know, another philosophy there is, with respect to bonding, if you're using cash reserves, the reserves are there for another reason. We have the 35% requirement that we try
Right.
to hit, and we're always above that, at least across the divisions, but not, you know, not as much above that as some of the graphics we've seen recently would indicate, that were part of the financial report, right? But the other thing to think about there is when you bond for a project, you're investing in long-lived infrastructure. If you're using cash reserves, the cash reserves are developed by the customers who have been the customers for the last several years or decades, and they may not be the ones benefiting from the investment in the infrastructure here. So that's another consideration here.
Okay.
Is that you'd like those infrastructure installation costs to be paid for by the folks benefiting from the install.
right.
These are 10-year bonds, am I correct?
20, yeah.
These are 20? I'd offer the resolution, waive the reading, authorizing the issuance and establishing the terms and conditions of sale and set sale date for August 1, 2017 at 10 a.m. in the amount of $5,560,000 general obligation public utility revenue bond series 2017A to fund 2017 capital improvement projects. And with that, I would just say, with interest rates as low as they still are, I think this is still a good time to be doing this.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? We have a motion and second to adopt a resolution and waive the reading, authorizing the issuance and establishing the terms and conditions of sale and set sale date for August 1, 2017 at 10 a.m. in the amount of $5,560,000 general obligation public utility revenue bonds, Series 2017A, to fund 2017 capital improvement projects. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Resolution.
Oh, I'm sorry. Need to call the roll.
Commissioner Baranick?
Yes.
Commissioner Fingland?
Yes.
Commissioner Hillersheim?
Yes.
Commissioner Swan?
Yes.
President Heine?
Yes. Resolution passes. The next item is to consider updates to the Personnel Committee, or excuse me, the Personnel Policy Manual.
Hi, President Heine and Commissioners. In your packet, you'll see there's 348 pages worth of information. I'm sure you all read it page to page. I thought about getting up here and even talking about some of the additional policies, but there are 25 to 30 additional policies, so I would be up here for a long time. So we haven't had a there hasn't been a general review of the personnel policy manual since 2011. So I went through it very thoroughly. We used the League of Minnesota Cities model handbook when going through it, and also looked at other city policies and handbooks. So as you can see, there were a lot of revisions made. A lot of additional policies were made. The city and the PUC personnel committees looked at it. The city council has approved the personnel policy manual on their June 20th city council meeting. And so I'll just touch base a couple of policies that we have added to the handbook. One being the social media policy, which I think is huge. Our police department right now has over almost 3,200 followers right now. So there was a big need for that policy in our handbook. So that's going to address the materials that are posted on social media, such as YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, and then creation of accounts, of social media accounts. It goes through guidelines for official communications and who must approve the participation, and also addresses what will not be allowed to be posted and what will be removed from those sites. Also addresses personal postings and publications of social media, and also includes administrators of the site. So that's one policy we've added. And then we also added a mobile device policy that we put into place last year. And that policy addresses employee-owned and city-owned devices. So that was another additional policy. Like I said, I'm not going to go through everything. If anybody has any questions at all, I can try to answer them for you. But that's all I had today.
I'll make a motion to approve the Personnel Committee's recommendation to adopt the revisions to the City PUC Personnel Policy Manual, which would become effective 30 days after adoption.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the Personnel Committee, or the Personnel Policy Manual motion? We have a motion and second to approve the Personnel Committee's recommendation to adopt the revisions to the City PUC Personnel Policy Manual, which would become effective 30 days after adoption. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is to consider issuing a community solar survey.
Good evening, Commission members. I guess some background to the request to issue a community solar survey. The Energy Awareness Commission and PUC issued a recent survey at our 2017 home show, and we had about 93% favorable response rate towards renewable energy projects, and 54% said they would be willing to pay more for renewable energy, although in that particular survey the amount premium portion was not requested. And I guess some of the additional background is community solar projects can provide customers who are not able to install install solar on their own homes, either due to renting or a poor location to do so. Also has the potential to reduce costs per panel, and then also allows them to influence the generation sources on the New Ulm grid. However, the community solar projects, or I guess solar in general, has a large range of pricing depending on, I guess, the size of the project, access to federal tax credits, and then I guess access to land location. So because of that, and because of the potential range, the New Ulm Public Utilities would like to issue a survey stating some of the high side potential costs of starting a community solar garden, and get responses back to that questionnaire. And then I think some things to consider moving forward is if there is a favorable response, we may be coming back to the commission to potentially move forward with a project. But this will give us a better idea of how many customers would be willing to participate. And I think one thing to note here is that in the example survey question, this does measure what we consider to be the high side costs for doing approximately a 40 kW project. That would limit the PUC's risk for sizing, and then also would remain under the net metering requirement. And I think if costs don't come in below that level, we would most likely not pursue the project. So are there any additional questions past the summary?
Yeah, so, you know, I think in the survey, it's really important that you have that cost nailed down as to what that would be, because I know for myself, I thought, you know, this would be a great way for me to do something for my house or maybe one of my kids. And then I looked at the numbers that you have in the solar garden with costs up to $1,250 per panel in a 20-year life. The estimated return at current rates doesn't even pay for the panel.
Yep.
So, you know, I would have thought over 20 years, I would have got my money out, and then I would at least had some times where I was getting a credit, you know, over above, but this is a negative return with the numbers that are published in the report. So, you know, if it actually turns out that it's $800, then maybe I would be, because right now I would say, you know what, I'm not gonna do that. But if it was $800 or $850, well, at least I'm gonna get something out of it. Maybe I might be inclined to do so. So knowing, I guess what I'm saying is knowing what that cost is before the survey goes out is gonna be important. Because if it's gonna be negative, you know,
Right.
that's gonna be a lot more no's.
And as William stated, we have been conservative in our estimate of the cost of the project. And we feel confident that $1,250 is a number that we could go out and buy the solar panels and have a contractor install them for us. That's what it's going to cost. That's not what we plan to do. What we plan to do is issue an RFP if we find that there are sufficient interest in the subscriptions. We plan to issue an RFP for 2 different types of projects. The first would be a project built by the PUC, built and owned by the PUC. The second would be a developer-built project where ideally the developer would take advantage of the tax incentives to build these solar projects that supply up to a 30% tax break for taxable entities, of which the PUC is not one. So
Yep.
we can't take advantage of that. So we have to present the worst case here. And, you know, it's break even if there's no increase in the cost of electricity from now for the next 20 years.
Correct.
If electricity does increase at any level, now New Ulm it hasn't increased for 5 years, but we can't. I can't guarantee that will always be the case. But yeah, worst case, it's break even. So it's not that this project is a moneymaker for anyone,
Yep.
but it's more about the environmental benefit that such a project would provide to the community and to the purchaser of that panel.
But
Yep.
if you're trying to find interest, your point is that you would be interested if the number was lower. I mean,
Yeah.
could it be presented in a way that says,
Yeah.
would you be interested if the cost was here? Would you be interested if the cost was here?
I mean, I would have been expecting, the number that I would expect to have seen when I saw this would have been that in 8 or 9 years, that the panel would have paid for itself. And at least then I would have got a $50 a year credit on my bill going forward after that. Not after 20 years, not only did you not get any credit to overcome your costs, but at the end of 20 years, now you don't have the panel either. You know, so
Right.
So, and it makes a big difference whether that cost is $1,250 or if it's $900 or $750, whatever that cost might be. I think that is gonna have a dramatic effect on what the survey actually is, or what people's interests are.
You would be a advocate for having a staged interest at various levels of cost here? We can
maybe
do
that
that.
overcomplicates it, but-
Well, I don't think it overcomplicates it. It's easy for us to produce such a survey. What it's going to do is obligate us to go, taking this project to the next level and going out to RFPs when we would not have a 100% confidence level that we would ever do the project. I guess, so we sign up and we get 100%, let's say at the full price, we get 50% subscription, and we probably wouldn't move forward. But if we could get the price down to $600, we get 100% subscription. And we're obligated to go to RFP, but we don't know the price until we gauge the interest of potential developers. At this size of project, at 40 kWs, there's going to be very limited interest. The developers that take advantage of the tax credits, they're building megawatt-sized projects to even make it worthwhile to them. So I'm not confident that we're going to see anything other than the $1,250, right? So I guess what I'm saying is if we do that, we may take this process to the next level and then get a response that is what we're anticipating here right now, which would essentially kill the project because there wouldn't be enough interest. So we're trying to get buy-in, not for the sake of a financial benefit, but for the environmental benefit's sake here, right? If it is better, and it could be, I mean, we may get, I know there's a local contractor who's monetizing the tax credits for a small community in a neighboring city. Maybe they'll be interested in doing it here. Then we would share 100% of that benefit with the subscribers here. So there is the potential benefit. It's just that we don't know until we have the responses to the requests.
So by using the high 1250, I think William described it as the high end, you're confident that's not necessarily, we're not devil's advocate, you're not jacking up the price to make sure everybody says no.
No.
You're being realistic about what this could very well come out to be, is that?
We're being realistic. We could build a solar project at the public utility, 40 kW project, and the price per panel would be at most $1,250 per panel at an assumed size of 325 watts.
And I didn't do the math, but how many panels is that?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's actually listed
123.
here. But yeah, about 123. I guess here we've listed 120 to kind of round that number off. But
So if you get people that come back and say there's 200 there, then what?
Well, then we would look at,
Because that would be put
so
you
it's
over
a
your-
staged approach here. If we
over
get
your
100%,
440.
if we get over 100%, if we get 200%, we'll look at potentially increasing the size of the project here. But if we're less than 100%, with this soft survey, there's no request for deposits here.
Right.
If we're less than 100%, we're not likely to advance the project. If we get 125, we plan to timestamp each of the responses so that we can go back to the list and approach them on a first-come, first-served basis, let them know we're planning to move forward with the project and solicit a small deposit to secure your spot, maybe $100, $50 to $100. So they're firm into the game then, and then we go to the next step, which is to solicit the proposals to develop this project. Now, like I say, it's worst case, but we're hopeful that someone comes in and offers to build the project, monetize the tax credits, and share that benefit for us. Then you, as a potential investor at $1,250, will determine what the effective rate is, and it may end up costing $800-900. Well, you will be assured to break even prior to 20 years.
And then what happens at the end of 20 years? We still have a solar farm then.
We would anticipate the equipment to be depreciated at that point, and over 20 years, we would anticipate that technology would vastly improve. We would I would say we'd be most likely to repower the project with new generating equipment and extend the existing contracts for an additional 20.
And if I might add to that, I think in a typical contract like this, it'd be a buyout at the end of the project. I think usually the utility has the option to buy that equipment at $1, something similar to that.
Okay.
Since this is a survey, would it be fair to, we've got our current residential rate at 0.123, to put, well, if rates rise to 0.143, so then your payback becomes
Yeah.
quicker.
And that's, actually, we looked at some of this back 10 years ago, I remember, and all of those folks who were wanting to fill our roof with panels all said, well, here's where your electric rate is today, and in 20 years, it's gonna be 16 cents. And so they're calculating the rise all the way along that curve to determine what the revenue coming in is. So,
Yeah, I just wonder if it's fair to put that on there as far as interest goes.
I think that's fair. We could put a couple of different economic models on there that showed payback at a 0% inflation rate on electricity rates, you know, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 to show different break-even points. And then possibly even include, you know, the possible, I won't say it's impossible, the possible case that we get a 30% break delivered to us from a developer here in a reduced effective cost, and see what the best case may be, just to show all ends of the spectrum here. I think that's a good thought. We can expand a little bit. We've got room on the other side of the survey.
Yeah.
Right, so.
Is the long-term power committee, this kind of a project have anything to do with kind of what that committee's discussing and,
I think it came out of there
okay?
partially.
Yeah.
This,
Yeah,
the
I
idea.
would say it's kind of been a mix between, Energy Awareness Commission has probably been the main group that has discussed something similar to these lines, but certainly could be discussed by the Long-Term Power Commission as well, or committee as well.
I'd offer a motion to direct the staff to issue community solar survey to determine community interest in a New Ulm Public Utilities owned community solar project.
I'll second.
Any more discussion? We have a motion and second to direct staff to issue a community solar survey to determine community interest in a New Ulm Public Utilities owned community solar project. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. The next item is to evaluate a consultant service agreement.
That's correct, President Heine, Commission members. We've talked about advanced meter reading, and that's essentially the system that we have right now where we use electronic equipment, computerized electronic equipment to collect meter reads for our electric, water, and gas. That data is then transferred to a billing database. And then we have the next step, which is advanced metering infrastructure, where we use a network of devices such as meters, communications network, computer systems, different protocols and organizational processes dedicated to distributing that utility information about our customer usage and for use by the utilities and our customers. So the AMR system, like we have, it's used strictly for billing. The strict AMR system is we do have more advanced meters on our industrial accounts where we can physically go out and download, provide interval data. But an AMI system like we're hopeful to move forward with here, it can do things like that for all of our meters. We can poll meters on a set time period basis. It will provide us information with respect to outages on the system, notifications of those outages through an automated process rather than receiving phone calls. Will allow us to do voltage monitoring throughout our system, load profile. In the case of the water system, it would help us with leak detection beyond the meter. In the case of our recent gas settlement with the Hutchinson Utilities, being able to poll our billing meters on a periodic basis would enable us to quickly see if there's a discrepancy between our bulk delivery meters and our billing meters out to our customers. Another probably one of the main features of an AMI system is that you can do remote shutoffs on all of your, on any of your delinquent accounts through the system here. So the AMI, I think it's safe to say, will allow for reduced labor costs once it's fully implemented with respect to the meter reading activities, but also the process for shutoffs. The shutoffs right now, that's a physical process. Our meter person and assistant go out and actually physically pull the meter set to disconnect power, and that's usually what's used to help in the payment of the bills. So this will be able to take place now remotely from the PUC office if we get such a system set up. Also, the data that we'll collect during this process will be used for cost of service studies to help in the development of our utility rates. We've talked a lot about solar here today. That's one of the things that we're struggling with. We have solar customers who have 40 kilowatt systems out there that on a monthly basis provide us more power than we provide them. And I think that having more detailed information about that type of production will be able to enhance our rate to fully account for the cost of such system. So our in-place metering system, we have some of the features necessary to move forward with an AMI system. We've got some of the meters. They're mainly one-way communication systems. So they provide meter back to us, but we can't go the other way at this point. So in order to fully realize the benefit of an AMI system, we need to develop a two-way communication system, and that may require some upgrades to our existing metering equipment. We're in the process of finalizing the water system, the water meters right now. It's our understanding that our water and gas meters are capable of two-way communication right now. Our electric meters may or may not be. The verdict's still out on that. So we've been discussing our situation with Value Tech Solutions, and they've offered to prepare a feasibility report for us to come in and look at the system that we have in place and to determine the potential costs of gravitating towards that next generation system and providing the benefits of going to that next system and accounting for the financial benefit of such a system. If their feasibility study that Value Tech proposes to do indicates that it's financially beneficial for us to proceed at this time, Value Tech will then be directed to proceed with the next step, and that's to go out to RFP, and RFP to a variety of vendors here. One of the shortcomings of investing in a metering system is you become really entwined with the equipment, intertwined with the equipment that you have, and it's hard to make a break. You know, the communication systems are proprietary, so you can't use one type of an ERT and go to another type of communication system. So we're hopeful that there may be some possibilities here, maybe some third parties that have developed equipment and softwares to help us with that process and maybe utilize our existing equipment to the greatest extent necessary, but we don't know at this time. So that's what we need to do first here, is just determine where we stand and what is actually possible with these vendors. And there are a lot of them out there. It's just that it appears that once you select one, you're pretty much married to that particular vendor for the long haul here until you do a major change out. So we feel this is the best way to move forward. We've reviewed Value Tech's proposals. They've worked with a number of other municipal utilities, such as New Ulm, some bigger, some smaller, but we feel they're well qualified to perform this work. We do have a budget allotment of $250,000 in the 2017 budget. That was for the full-scale development of this fixed network AMI system. The Value Tech proposal is $39,450, which gets us through the vendor negotiations if it's indicated it's financially beneficial for us to take it to that level.
So that the financial benefit will be part of their...
Part of the feasibility.
Okay.
Yes.
So they would be looking at our labor costs, at the the other kind of soft benefits that we would see through better data analysis, all that stuff.
That stuff,
To
right?
give us a better idea of a payback period.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I'll move to direct the Utilities Director to execute a consultant services agreement with Value Tech Solutions for the preparation of an advanced metering infrastructure AMI feasibility study, request for proposal, and vendor selection services.
I'll second.
Any discussion on the motion? We have a motion and second to direct the Utilities Director to execute a consultant services agreement with Value Tech Solutions for the preparation of an advanced metering infrastructure feasibility study, request for proposal, and vendor selection services. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. The next item is to consider a proposal for engineering system services for an electric system study.
Good afternoon. Yeah, this is to revisit the 20-year plan, which the last one was done in 2008. We've typically done them about every 5 years. And it just looks at our current infrastructure utilization and tries to point out any shortcomings that we have within our system. And as Director Rossi just pointed out, we're finally seeing a little bit of growth on the system over the last, since 2008. It's been relatively flat growth, but now we're starting to see some, both from expansions from our industrials, and then just, as you know, the armory's coming up on the hill. We're going to see some of those types of things that we have to account for. And that's why we just think that now would be a prudent time to revisit this study. Do you have any questions, or am I glazing over it a little too much?
We did talk about this at the Long-Term Power
Yeah.
Commission also, and thought it was, from that group, thought it was something that should be done.
I'll make a motion authorizing the city manager to accept and sign the proposal for engineering services for an electric system study and 20-year plan from DGR Engineering.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? And the motion and second to authorize the city manager to accept and sign the proposal for engineering services for an electric system study and 20-year plan from DGR Engineering. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries. The next item on the agenda is to consider authorizing the city manager to sign a proposal for additional engineering services. Mr. Persick?
Yeah, this is to, we always try to rehab some wells. It's in the budget every year. This year, we're going to try to do the 2 wells in the Mount Simon Aquifer, if you'll recall. George had Jeff Ledeen do a presentation on all of our wells in, I think it was January or February. These are the 2 that we are not part of the package that we're submitting for funding for a grant proposal in. These would be a standalone project, and obviously this would be self-funded. But what our goal is here is basically to totally rehab this well to the standards for new municipal drinking water wells. Just like it was a new well, they're gonna take all the components out, evaluate everything. What is deemed to be reliable and in good shape will go back in the hole. Otherwise, it'll be replaced. So it's one of the more aggressive well rehabilitations we've done. But the goal is to basically bring it back to as close to new condition as we can. And if you look at the age of the wells, number 4 was drilled in 1987, but number 6 has got a few more years on it. It was in the 1930s. So, and they have had maintenance done to them, obviously, over that time. But any questions? Or?
I would authorize the city manager to accept and sign the proposal for engineering services for the rehabilitation of wells number 4 and 6 from Short Elliott Hendrickson Incorporated in the amount of $22,400.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? We have a motion and second to authorize the city manager to accept and sign the proposal for engineering services for the rehabilitation of wells numbers 4 and 6 from Short Elliott Hendrickson Incorporated in the amount of $22,400. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. And you have another one, Mr. Percy.
Yes, this is a change order for the ATAD project. The city manager had authority to go 1% over, which was $45,000. This is a change order for $68,000. And it was time sensitive, so it's been administratively approved already. The crew could do the boring last week, or we were going to be waiting until the last week in August or early September. Our goal is to get the ATAD back up and in production around September 1st. And the importance of this is they're currently creating a Class B solid. They've got one cell already filled up. They're working on filling the second cell for storage. They have 4 cells. And we would like to be producing Class A. It's much easier for our staff to apply. Permitting is much less invasive if we're back to a Class A. And obviously, we want this work done with the lowest cost vendor as soon as possible. So it was deemed that, and this week they will be completing it, so it will be done, everything will be done by the 4th of July. So if you have any questions, I guess that's kind of why we did what we've done.
I'd make the motion ratifying the city manager's authorization of change order number 1, increasing the contract amount of $68,395 for the wastewater treatment plant's ATAD upgrade project with Rice Lake Construction Group.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? We have a motion and second to ratify the city manager's authorization of change order number 1, increasing the contract amount by $68,395 for the wastewater treatment plant's ATAD upgrade project with Rice Lake Construction Group. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And the motion carries. Okay, the final item on the agenda is to consider our list of claims.
I'll offer the motion to accept the list of claims paid in the amount of $3,230,240.26 and approve the list of claims to be paid in the amount of $1,865,730.45.
Second.
Any discussion? On the motion and second to accept the list of claims paid in the amount of $3,230,240.26 and approve list of claims to be paid in the amount of $1,865,730.45. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I think that's it. So we are adjourned.